Emma Peterson checked her phone for the seventh time in 3 minutes. 6:47 p.m., 17 minutes late. She sat alone at the corner table of Winter's Corner Coffee Shop, her fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug of chamomile tea that had long since gone cold. The autumn warmth that usually made this place feel cozy now felt suffocating. Around her, couples leaned into whispered conversations, their laughter punctuating the soft jazz playing overhead. She was the only person sitting alone. Earlier that day, she'd performed emergency surgery on a golden retriever who had swallowed a tennis ball. The dog's grateful owner had pressed a $100 bill into her hand despite Emma's protests. For the animal shelter fund, the woman had insisted, knowing Emma's small veterinary clinic struggled to cover the costs of caring for strays and wildlife. The wealthy clientele who brought their pampered pets to her modest clinic often couldn't understand why she hadn't joined one of the sleek corporate practices in the financial district. But Emma's grandmother had founded Neighborhood Paws 40 years ago, and after her passing, Emma couldn't bear to see it close, even if maintaining it meant living paycheck to paycheck. She told herself she'd give him 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes, and then she'd text Rachel, her colleague who'd set this whole thing up, and tell her that blind dates just weren't her thing. That after 5 years of focusing solely on her veterinary practice, maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe she'd been right to keep her walls up. Just one coffee date, Rachel had insisted 3 days ago, cornering Emma in the clinic break room. His name is Daniel Foster, 34, some big shot in architecture or something. And Emma, he's wonderful, trust me. But trust was hard. And sitting here watching the door, feeling that familiar sting of disappointment creeping in, trust felt impossible. Emma sighed, fishing a $10 bill from her wallet and placing it under her mug. She was gathering her purse when the bell above the door chimed. Emma looked up, hope flickering despite herself. But it wasn't a man in his 30s. It wasn't Daniel Foster. It was 2 identical little girls. They couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with curly brown hair that bounced as they moved, and bright green eyes that scanned the coffee shop with startling determination. They wore matching red coats over what looked like expensive private school uniforms, pleated skirts, crisp white shirts, and navy blue cardigans with an embroidered crest. Their small hands clasped together as they surveyed the room with the confidence of tiny executives. And then those eyes landed on Emma. Before she could process what was happening, the girls marched straight toward her table with the precision of soldiers on a mission. The slightly taller one, by maybe half an inch, stopped directly in front of Emma, tilted her head, and asked with complete seriousness, "Are you Miss Emma?" Emma blinked her hand, still clutching her purse. "Yes, I am." "And you are?" "I'm Lily," the girl announced, then gestured to her sister. "This is Rose. Our daddy's sorry he's late." The world seemed to tilt slightly. These were Daniel's daughters. They had to be. But Rachel hadn't mentioned children, hadn't mentioned twins, hadn't mentioned anything beyond wonderful. "He had to stay at work," Rose added softly, her voice gentler than her sister's, "because of an emergency." Lily quickly covered her sister's mouth with her hand. "Rose?" Emma's confusion must have been written all over her face because Lily sighed, an old, weary sigh that seemed far too mature for a 6-year-old, and pulled out the chair across from Emma. She sat down, tugging her sister down beside her. "Okay," Lily said, folding her hands on the table like she was about to conduct a business meeting. "We should tell the truth." "The truth?" Emma echoed. "Daddy doesn't know we're here," Rose whispered, guilt flickering across her small face. Emma's eyes widened. "He doesn't wait what?" "But he is sorry he's late," Lily insisted. "We know because we heard him on the phone last night." Emma leaned forward, drawn in despite herself. "Last night," Rose nodded, her curls bouncing. "We were supposed to be asleep, but we heard him in the hallway. Someone called about a big problem at the new library building, something about the foundation. He kept saying that he couldn't believe this was happening tonight. He said he had something really important at 6:30 at Winter's Corner." "And you two figured out that was here?" Emma asked, a smile tugging at her lips, despite the absurdity of the situation. "We are very smart," Lily said matter-of-factly. "We remembered the name because Daddy wrote it on the calendar in the kitchen. He circled it 3 times and drew a smiley face." Something warm flickered in Emma's chest. A smiley face. "He was so excited," Rose continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "He ironed his shirt yesterday. Daddy never irons." Emma couldn't help but laugh, soft and genuine. These 2 little girls sitting across from her with their earnest faces and their conspiracy had just turned her disappointing evening into something else, something unexpected. So when we heard him say he might be late because of work, we made a plan, Lily explained. We asked Mrs. Henderson, she's our babysitter, to bring us here. We told her it was really, really important. Emma glanced through the window. Sure enough, there was an elderly woman sitting in a sedan parked at the curb, watching the girls with a mixture of bewilderment and patience. When she caught Emma's eye, she waved. We begged her, Rosa admitted, her cheeks flushing. We might have cried a little. Strategic crying, Lily corrected firmly. It was necessary. Emma pressed her lips together to keep from laughing outright. These girls were something else entirely. So would you like to sit with me for a bit, maybe have some hot chocolate? Their faces lit up like Christmas morning. Lily jumped out of her chair and ran to the window, gesturing wildly to Mrs. Henderson, who sighed but nodded with a resigned smile. When the girls settled back into their seats, Emma caught the barista's attention and ordered 2 hot chocolates with extra whipped cream. As they waited, she studied Lily and Rose more carefully. Beneath their confidence and determination, there was something else, a weight, a sadness that children their age shouldn't carry. The kind of shadow that comes from knowing loss too young. So, Emma said gently, tell me about your dad. Does he go on many dates? The question hung in the air for a moment. The twins exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them, and then Lily shook her head slowly. Never, she said quietly. You're the first one since Mommy went to heaven. The coffee shop noise, the hiss of the espresso machine, the chatter of other customers, the clinking of cups, all of it seemed to fade into the background. Emma felt her heart clench, her breath catching slightly. When did that happen? She asked, her voice soft. 2 years ago, Rose said, her small hands fidgeting with the edge of her jacket. Right after we started pre-K, she got really sick really fast. The doctor said it was something with her brain. Lily traced an invisible pattern on the table's surface, her finger moving in small circles. And a nurse something. Aneurysm, Emma said quietly. The word appeared in her mind, clinical and cold. Lily nodded. Daddy was really sad. He didn't smile for a long, long time. The hot chocolates arrived, mountains of whipped cream topped with chocolate sprinkles. The girls' eyes widened with delight, the somber moment temporarily forgotten as they reached for their treats. Emma watched them, her heart heavy with this new understanding. Daniel Foster wasn't just some big shot in architecture who had stood her up. He was a widowed father of twin girls struggling with grief and responsibility and a work emergency. Is your daddy a good dad? Emma asked, passing them napkins as they created whipped cream mustaches. Both girls nodded emphatically, whipped cream bobbing. The best, Rose said firmly, even when he's sad. He built us a tree house, Lily added, pride evident in her voice. All by himself. It took forever. A tree house. Emma raised her eyebrows, intrigued. Lily's eyes lit up. It's the most amazing tree house ever. It has windows and a real door and little shelves for our books. Daddy worked on it every weekend for 3 months. Even when it was raining, Rose added, he'd come inside all wet and tired, but he never stopped until it was finished. Why was the tree house so important? Emma asked, sensing there was more to the story. The twins exchanged another look. After Mommy died, Daddy couldn't sleep. Rose explained softly. We heard him walking around the house at night. Sometimes he'd sit in our room and just watch us sleep. One night we found him crying in the backyard, Lily continued. He was looking at the big oak tree. The next morning he started building the treehouse. He said building things helps make the sad feel smaller. Rose added, her small face solemn. He said the treehouse would be our special place where we could always feel safe. Emma's throat tightened. She imagined this man she'd never met, shattered by grief, channeling his pain into creating something beautiful for his daughters. Working through rain and exhaustion, finding healing in the simple act of hammering nails and measuring boards. The best part is the windows, Lily said, her eyes brightening. Daddy made them shaped like butterflies because Mommy loved butterflies. That sounds beautiful, Emma said sincerely. It is, Rose nodded. Sometimes we go there to talk to Mommy. Daddy says she can hear us better when we're up closer to the sky. Emma felt her eyes growing damp and blinked rapidly. She'd come here expecting a simple coffee date, perhaps a pleasant conversation with an attractive man. Instead, she was sitting with 2 little girls with old souls, hearing about loss and resilience and butterfly windows. Your dad sounds like a wonderful person, Emma said softly. Lily leaned forward, her expression suddenly serious again. He is, but he's lonely, we can tell. And you think I might help with that? Emma asked gently. You're pretty, Rose said simply, and you like animals. Daddy says animals can tell if people are good or bad. We have a dog named Scout, Lily added. He's a rescue. Daddy says Scout had a hard life before us, so we have to be extra kind to him. Emma smiled. A man who rescued dogs and built tree houses and made butterfly windows for his grieving daughters. A man who circled dates on calendars and drew smiley faces. What else does your dad... The bell above the door chimed again, and this time when Emma looked up, her breath caught in her throat. A tall man stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning the coffee shop with a mix of frustration and resignation. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, though his blue tie was slightly loosened and his collar unbuttoned. His dark hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and there was a day's worth of stubble on his jaw. He was simultaneously put together and coming apart power and vulnerability in one package. In his hand, he clutched a sleek phone, and as Emma watched, he lifted it to his ear. Sophie, I've been waiting 15 minutes. Are you sure this is the right... He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze landing on the corner table. On Emma. On the twins. His face drained of color. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, then slipped it into his pocket as he strode across the coffee shop, his expression cycling through shock, confusion, and mortification. Lily, Rose. His voice was deep-strained with barely controlled emotion. What are you doing here? Surprise, Lily said, attempting brightness, but wilting slightly under her father's stunned gaze. We came to help, Rose added softly, shrinking in her chair. Daniel Foster stood frozen beside the table, his green eyes, the same shade as his daughter's, moving from the girls to Emma. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of exhaustion beneath them, and something else, a deep, lingering sadness that all his success in tailored suits couldn't hide. I am so sorry, he finally said to Emma, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. I had no idea they were here. I thought they were at home with Mrs. Henderson. She's outside in the car, Rose pointed out helpfully. Daniel closed his eyes briefly as if praying for patience. Of course she is. Won't you sit down, Daddy? Lily patted the empty chair beside her. We've been interviewing Miss Emma for you. Interviewing. Daniel repeated the word faintly, then turned to Emma with naked horror in his eyes. God, I can't even imagine what they've told you. Nothing bad, Emma assured him, finding her voice at last. They're lovely. They're supposed to be at home, Daniel said, his voice dropping as he addressed his daughters. How did you even... Never mind. We'll discuss this later. He turned back to Emma, his expression apologetic. I am genuinely mortified. This was not how I planned for tonight to go. Your work emergency? Emma asked. He nodded, finally sinking into the chair beside Lily. Major structural issue with the library project. 3 years of work and a $50 million contract hanging in the balance. I've been on site for the past 4 hours trying to sort it out. Did you fix it? Rose asked, concern in her small voice. Daniel's face softened as he looked at his daughter. Not yet, sweetheart, but we have a plan now. The engineering team is working on it. He looked back at Emma, his expression turning wry. I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce myself properly. Daniel Foster. Emma Peterson. I know, he said, then winced. That sounded creepy. I meant Rachel told me about you. She speaks very highly of you. Emma nodded, suddenly feeling shy. There was something intimidating about Daniel Foster that had nothing to do with his obvious wealth or the power he emanated. It was the intensity in his gaze, the way he seemed to focus completely on whoever was speaking, as if nothing else in the world existed in that moment. Rachel didn't mention you had children, Emma said, then immediately wondered if that sounded like a complaint. I asked her not to, Daniel admitted. I find it's simpler that way. Women act different when they know about us, Lily said matter-of-factly, licking whipped cream from her spoon. They get this weird smile and talk like we're babies. Or they try too hard, Rose added, like the lady at Daddy's office Christmas party who kept asking if we wanted to see pictures of her cats. Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm sorry about this. I can call you a car if you'd like to leave. I completely understand. Actually, Emma said, surprising herself, I'm enjoying getting to know Lily and Rose. Something flickered across Daniel's face. Relief, gratitude, and something more complex that Emma couldn't quite name. So what happened with your date? Rose asked innocently, turning to her father. Did you forget? I didn't forget, Daniel said firmly. I had every intention of being here. I was looking forward to it. But then the call came about the library and I had to go. I sent a text to cancel, but... He frowned, pulling out his phone and scrolling through messages. I sent it to Rachel, not to you, Emma. I'm so sorry. I asked her to let you know. Rachel's at a conference in Chicago, Emma said. Her flight was this afternoon. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Of course she is. I'm making a complete mess of this. Is your library falling down, Daddy? Lily asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Despite the tension, Emma couldn't help but smile at the child's directness. Daniel's lips quirked slightly too. Not yet, he replied, and we're going to make sure it doesn't. He turned to Emma. I'm the CEO of Foster Designs. We specialize in public buildings, libraries, museums, community centers. The Blake Memorial Library is our biggest project to date. I saw it in the newspaper, Emma said, recognition dawning. The building with the glass dome and the reading garden. Daniel nodded, a hint of pride crossing his features. That's the one. 3 years in development. We're 6 months from completion, and now we've discovered an issue with the foundation on the east wing. Can you fix it? Emma asked. We'll have to, he said simply. There are 300 people employed on that project, not counting the subcontractors. Plus, it's going to be the city's new landmark. Failure isn't an option. There was a quiet authority in his voice, a certainty that spoke of someone accustomed to making impossible things happen through sheer force of will. Emma could see why he'd built a successful company. He radiated competence and determination. Daddy's buildings never fall down, Lily stated confidently. He's the best architect in the whole world. Daniel's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. I appreciate the vote of confidence, Lilybug, but I'm just one part of a very talented team. The nickname, Casual Affectionate, humanized him instantly. This powerful CEO with his expensive watch and burden of responsibility was also a father who called his daughter Lilybug. So you run your own company? Emma asked. That must be demanding. It can be, Daniel acknowledged, but I have an exceptional team. My assistant Sophie practically runs my life. And I've structured things so I can be home most evenings for dinner with these two. He ruffled Rose's curls gently. Except when buildings try to fall down, Rose said sagely. Daniel laughed, a warm, rich sound that transformed his face. The weariness lifted, and Emma caught a glimpse of the man beneath the responsibility, younger, lighter, with crinkles at the corners of his eyes that spoke of happier times. Except then, he agreed, but that's pretty rare. Daddy works in a big office building downtown, Lily told Emma proudly. He has a desk bigger than my bed and windows that go all the way to the ceiling. And everyone calls him Mr. Foster and looks scared when he walks by. Daniel winced. They do not look scared. They do, Rose confirmed, except for Sophie. She just rolls her eyes when you're not looking. Emma laughed at the consternation on Daniel's face. It sounds like Sophie keeps you grounded. Someone has to, he admitted. I can run a company with 300 employees, but these two... He gestured to his daughters with a mix of exasperation and adoration. These two are the real bosses. Daddy, we're hungry, Lily announced suddenly. Can we have dinner here with Miss Emma? Daniel glanced at Emma, apology in his eyes. I think we've imposed on Miss Emma enough for one evening, Lily. I'm sure she'd like to go home. Actually, Emma found herself saying, I haven't had dinner yet either. Hope flickered across Daniel's face, quickly replaced by caution. Are you sure I wouldn't want you to feel obligated? I'm not, Emma said honestly. This has turned out to be a far more interesting evening than I expected. Daniel studied her for a moment as if trying to determine whether she was being polite or sincere. Whatever he saw in her expression must have convinced him. Then we'd be honored if you'd join us for dinner, he said formally, but his eyes were warm. He checked his watch, a sleek, expensive timepiece that probably cost more than Emma's car. I have to make a quick call first if you don't mind. I need to reschedule a meeting I was supposed to have after our coffee. Go ahead, Emma said, sensing this was a significant gesture. A CEO rearranging his schedule for a date that had already gone sideways. Daniel stepped away from the table phone to his ear. His voice was too low to hear the words, but Emma could see the shift in his posture. Straight-backed, authoritative, a man accustomed to command. Daddy never cancels meetings, Rose whispered, her eyes wide. Never, ever. He must really like you, Lily added with undisguised glee. Emma felt a flush rise to her cheeks. I think he's just being polite. Daddy says politeness is what you show strangers, Rose countered. This is different. Before Emma could respond, Daniel returned, slipping his phone into his pocket. All set, he said, then glanced at his daughters. Now you two, we need to have a quick talk about your escapade this evening. The twins exchanged a guilty look. What you did was not okay, Tunk. Daniel continued, his voice firm but gentle. You worried Mrs. Henderson, you interrupted Miss Emma's evening, and you left home without permission. That's 3 serious rules broken. But Daddy, Lily began. We were trying to help. Daniel held up a hand. I understand your intentions were good, but the way you went about it was wrong. Actions have consequences even when we mean well. Emma watched impressed by his parenting. He wasn't angry or harsh, but he was clear about boundaries. Are we in big trouble? Rose asked in a small voice. We'll discuss your consequences at home, Daniel said. For now, I think you owe Miss Emma an apology for ambushing her. Both girls turned to Emma with genuine remorse on their small faces. We're sorry, Miss Emma, they said in unison. We just didn't want Daddy to miss meeting you, Lily added. And we didn't want you to think he didn't want to come, Rose finished. Emma smiled at them. Thank you for the apology, and while I don't condone sneaking out, I am glad I got to meet you both. Relief washed over their faces, and Daniel gave Emma a grateful look. Now, he said, standing up, if we're going to have dinner, we should find somewhere with real food. Any suggestions? Emma, I'm afraid I don't know this neighborhood well. There's a good Italian place around the corner, Emma offered. Nothing fancy, but the food is excellent. Daniel nodded. Sounds perfect. He extended a hand to each of his daughters. Let me just speak with Mrs. Henderson first and send her home. As he walked the twins to the door, Emma watched their interaction. Daniel leaned down to listen attentively to something Lily was saying, his expression serious as he nodded. There was something profoundly touching about seeing this powerful man, a CEO who commanded hundreds of employees and managed multi-million-dollar projects, bending down to his daughter's level, giving her his complete attention. When they returned, both girls were smiling again. The cloud of potential punishment temporarily lifted. Mrs. Henderson has been released from her duties, Daniel announced with mock gravity. She seemed quite relieved. We did promise to buy her new yarn for her knitting, Rose admitted. And chocolates, Lily added. And chocolates, Daniel confirmed, shaking his head with a mixture of exasperation and fondness. Apparently my children are skilled negotiators. I can't imagine where they get that from, Emma said, raising an eyebrow at the CEO. Daniel laughed, a genuine sound that lit up his face. Touché, Miss Peterson. The walk to the restaurant was short but pleasant. The autumn evening was cool but not cold. The streets lined with trees just beginning to turn golden. The twins skipped ahead, their energy seemingly inexhaustible, while Daniel and Emma followed at a more sedate pace. I want to apologize again, Daniel said quietly. Not just for being late, but for the ambush. This isn't how I pictured tonight going. How did you picture it? Emma asked, genuinely curious. Daniel considered the question. Calmer, more controlled. I had a plan. He glanced at his daughters, then back at Emma with a rueful smile. I should know by now that plans rarely survive contact with those two. They're remarkable children, Emma said sincerely. They are, Daniel agreed, his voice softening. They've been through so much, but somehow they've remained joyful, resilient. Sometimes I think they're stronger than I am. I doubt that, Emma said. They clearly adore you. Daniel was quiet for a moment. After Elizabeth died, my wife, I was lost, completely shattered. The only thing that kept me functioning was knowing they needed me. He looked ahead at the twins, his expression a complex mixture of love and grief. They saved me in a way. The simple honesty of this statement caught Emma off guard. There was no self-pity in his voice, just a straightforward acknowledgement of pain and healing. I'm sorry about your wife, Emma said softly. Thank you. Daniel's voice was equally soft. It's been 2 years, but sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times it feels like a lifetime ago. They walked in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling between them. I should probably warn you, Emma said finally. I was engaged once, 5 years ago. Daniel glanced at her, surprise flickering across his features at the sudden confession. What happened? Emma shrugged, aiming for casualness, but not quite achieving it. He decided he didn't want to marry someone whose priority was her career. He wanted someone more traditional, someone who would put his needs first. I'm sorry, Daniel said. That must have been painful. It was, Emma acknowledged. But in retrospect, he did me a favor. We wanted different things. Better to find out before the wedding than after. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Elizabeth was a veterinarian too, you know. The coincidence startled Emma. She was large animal practice specializing in horses. A small, sad smile touched his lips. She used to come home covered in hay and smelling like the stables. The girls would tackle her at the door, not caring a bit. Rachel didn't mention that, Emma said, wondering if her friend had deliberately set her up with Daniel because of this connection. I doubt she knew. I don't talk about Elizabeth much except with the girls. He glanced at Emma. It's not something I usually bring up on first dates. Is that what this is, a first date? Emma asked, half teasing but genuinely uncertain given the unusual circumstances. Daniel considered the question seriously. I think so, he said finally. Not the one I planned, but maybe better for it. At least now you've met the most important people in my life right up front. No surprises later. They reached the restaurant, a small family-owned place with checkered tablecloths and the rich aroma of garlic and tomato sauce wafting from the door. The twins were already pressing their faces against the window, pointing at a dessert cart visible inside. "I should warn you," Emma said as Daniel reached for the door. "This place isn't exactly what you're probably used to." Daniel paused his hand on the door. "What do you mean?" Emma gestured vaguely at his tailored suit, his expensive watch. "It's not a power lunch spot, no sommelier, no valet parking." Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes, followed by something that might have been relief. "Emma, I grew up in a two-bedroom apartment above my parents' hardware store. I didn't taste real Italian food until I was in college." He smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Trust me, I'm more comfortable in places like this than in those sterile power lunch restaurants." The admission surprised her. Somehow she'd assumed he came from wealth, that his success was built on a foundation of privilege. This glimpse of his background that shifted her perception slightly. The restaurant owner, Mario, greeted Emma by name and showed them to a corner table. The twins immediately climbed into chairs next to each other, heads bent over the children's menu that Mario provided. Daniel pulled out Emma's chair for her, the gesture natural and unaffected. "You come here often?" he asked as they settled in. "At least once a week," Emma admitted. "My clinic is just 3 blocks from here, and after a long day of barking dogs and scratchy cats, Mario's lasagna is exactly what I need." "You own the veterinary clinic?" Daniel asked. Neighborhood pause, Emma nodded. "It was my grandmother's. I took over when she passed away 5 years ago." "That's impressive," Daniel said with what sounded like genuine admiration. "Small business ownership is no small feat." "It's tiny compared to your company," Emma demurred. "Scale doesn't determine value," Daniel replied. "Foster Design started as just me at a drafting table in my apartment. It took 15 years to build it to what it is now." "Daddy works too hard," Lily chimed in without looking up from her menu. "Sophie says he's a workaholic. That's someone who works all the time," she added helpfully to Emma. "Sophie talks too much," Daniel muttered, but there was no real annoyance in his voice. "She says somebody has to tell you the truth because everyone else is too scared of you," Rose added innocently. Emma pressed her lips together to suppress a smile. "Your assistant sounds like quite a character." "She's been with me since the beginning," Daniel admitted. "She's more like family than an employee at this point, which apparently gives her the right to psychoanalyze me to my children." "Is she right?" Emma asked boldly. "Are you a workaholic?" Daniel considered the question with surprising seriousness. "I was, for a long time. Building the company consumed me." He glanced at his daughters. "That changed when the girls were born. And then after Elizabeth died," he paused. "Let's just say I learned the hard way what really matters." The rawness of his admission hung in the air between them. Emma sensed that Daniel Foster wasn't a man who opened up easily, that this level of honesty was rare for him. "What about you?" he asked, turning the question back to her. "Your grandmother's clinic. Was taking it over always the plan?" "Not exactly," Emma admitted. "I was working at a large animal hospital in Denver when she got sick. I came back to help out temporarily thinking I'd sell the practice afterward. But once I was there," she shrugged, "it felt right. The connections with the patients, the families. At the corporate practice, everything was about efficiency and profit margins. At Neighborhood Paws, it's about relationships. So you chose purpose over profit," Daniel observed. "That's rare these days." "Says the CEO," Emma teased lightly. "Fair point," Daniel acknowledged with a small smile. "Though I'd like to think we've maintained our values even as we've grown. We still design buildings that serve communities, not just look impressive on skylines." Their conversation was interrupted by Mario returning to take their orders. The twins insisted on spaghetti and meatballs, while Daniel chose the restaurant's signature lasagna on Emma's recommendation. "Daddy needs someone like you," Lily declared suddenly after Mario had gone. "Someone who isn't scared of him just because he's the boss." Emma nearly choked on her water. "Lily," Daniel admonished, his cheeks flushing slightly. "What?" "It's true," Lily insisted. "Remember when that lady from the charity ball kept calling you Mr. Foster? Even though you told her your name was Daniel, she looked like she was going to faint when you talked to her." "That's because Daddy's important," Rose explained to Emma earnestly. "His picture was in a magazine. We have it on the fridge." Emma glanced at Daniel, who looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. "Really, which magazine?" "Business something," Lily said with a wave of her hand. "It had a boring cover, but inside it said Daddy is one of the most influential people in architecture." It was just a regional business publication, Daniel said modestly. They needed content that month. The article said Daddy's company changed the way public buildings are designed, Rose continued proudly. It said he's revolutionary, Daniel supplied, then immediately looked embarrassed. That's impressive, Emma said sincerely. It's overstated, Daniel countered. We just prioritize functionality and accessibility alongside aesthetics. It shouldn't be revolutionary, but somehow it is. Daddy designed a library where kids with wheelchairs can reach all the books, Lily told Emma. His buildings have special quiet rooms for people who don't like noise and signs that blind people can read with their fingers. Braille, Daniel clarified. You design with universal accessibility in mind, Emma said, genuinely impressed. That is revolutionary. Daniel shrugged, but she could tell he was pleased by her understanding. It should be standard practice. Buildings serve people, all people. Form follows function, and function should be inclusive. There was passion in his voice, a glimpse of the drive that had built his company from nothing. Emma found herself drawn to this aspect of him, not the wealth or the power, but the vision, the commitment to principles beyond profit. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. The twins attacked their spaghetti with enthusiasm, quickly decorating their faces with tomato sauce. Daniel helped Rose twirl her pasta, showing a practiced hand at managing mealtime with children. As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily. Daniel asked about Emma's clinic, showing genuine interest in her work with rescue animals. Emma inquired about his current projects beyond the troubled library. They discovered a shared love of hiking, though Daniel admitted he rarely found time for it these days. We go camping sometimes, Rose offered. In the summer, Daddy knows how to build a fire without matches. An essential CEO skill, Emma teased. Eagle Scouts, Daniel explained. Some lessons stick with you. Daddy can also tie knots and identify poison ivy, Lily added. And he can find the North Star. Truly a Renaissance man, Emma said, smiling. Jack of all trades, master of none, Daniel countered with self-deprecating humor. Except architecture, Emma pointed out. Except that, he acknowledged. As the meal progressed, Emma observed how Daniel interacted with his daughters. Patient, attentive, never talking down to them. He cut Rose's meatball into smaller pieces without being asked, remembered that Lily preferred her water without ice, and listened intently when they shared stories about their day at school. These small gestures revealed more about him than any business magazine profile could. By the time they finished their main course, the initial awkwardness had completely dissipated. The conversation had found a natural rhythm, punctuated by the twins' observations and questions. Emma was surprised by how comfortable it felt sitting across from this man she just met, surrounded by the warmth of the small restaurant and the antics of his children. Daniel glanced at his watch, then at the twins, who were beginning to show signs of fatigue despite their determination to stay awake. I think we might need to skip dessert tonight, ladies. It's getting past your bedtime. Predictably, this announcement was met with protests. But Daddy, we haven't had ice cream yet, Lily objected. And Miss Emma hasn't told us about her dog, Rose added, clearly grasping for reasons to extend the evening. I don't actually have a dog, Emma admitted. Just a very lazy cat named Chairman Meow. This revelation produced giggles from the twins and an appreciative groan from Daniel at the pun. Maybe we can hear about Chairman Meow another time, Daniel suggested, then glanced at Emma with a question in his eyes. If Miss Emma would like that. The invitation was clear, and Emma found herself nodding. I would like that very much. Relief and pleasure crossed Daniel's face. He signaled for the check, and when it arrived, he reached for it automatically. Please let me, Emma said, surprising herself with the offer. You can get it next time. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, something warming in his gaze. Next time, he repeated softly. I like the sound of that. But he gently pushed her hand away from the check. I insist, though, especially after the chaos my daughters caused. We're not chaos, Lily objected. We're spontaneous. Mrs. Bridger at school says that's a good quality. Mrs. Bridger has never seen you two plotting an ambush at a coffee shop, Daniel retorted, but he was smiling as he handed his credit card to the waiter. Outside the restaurant, the night had grown cooler. Rose shivered slightly, and Daniel immediately removed his suit jacket and wrapped it around her small shoulders. The gesture was so natural, so paternal, that Emma felt a tug in her chest. The expensive jacket looked comically large on the little girl, but she snuggled into it with obvious contentment. My car is just around the corner, Daniel said, pointing down the street. Can we drop you somewhere? Emma hesitated, torn between extending their time together and the wisdom of maintaining some boundaries on a first date. My apartment is actually just a few blocks in the other direction. I usually walk. Then we'll walk you home, Daniel decided. If that's okay with you. You don't have to. We want to, he said simply. Right, girls. Both twins nodded enthusiastically, though Emma noted their earlier energy had dimmed considerably. Rose was leaning against her father's leg, eyes heavy. All right then, Emma conceded. They set off toward Emma's apartment, the twins walking between them. After half a block, Rose's steps began to drag, and without comment, Daniel scooped her up into his arms. She immediately nestled her head against his shoulder, arms wrapped around his neck. I can carry you too, Lily, Emma offered, noticing the other twin's pace slowing. Lily considered the offer seriously, then nodded and reached up. Emma lifted her, surprised at how light the child felt. Lily settled against her with immediate trust that touched Emma deeply. They continued in comfortable silence, the weight of a sleepy child creating an unexpected intimacy between them. When they reached Emma's building, a modest pre-war apartment complex with a small courtyard, Daniel looked up at it with interest. This is a beautiful building, he said. 1930s? 1928, Emma confirmed. The architecture buff and you can't help noticing, huh? Occupational hazard, Daniel admitted. But it really is lovely. Those archways, the detailed cornices, they don't make them like this anymore. That's what my landlord says when something breaks, Emma joked, carefully setting Lily down. The little girl blinked sleepily, then threw her arms around Emma's waist in a surprise hug. Bye, Miss Emma. I'm glad we found you. Emma's heart melted as she returned the hug. I'm glad too, Lily. Rose, still in her father's arms, reached out one small hand to pat Emma's shoulder. Will we see you again? She asked directly. Emma glanced at Daniel, who was watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. I hope so, she said honestly. If your dad wants to. I do, Daniel said, his voice low and certain. He shifted Rose in his arms and pulled out his phone with his free hand. May I have your number? Your real number, not just whatever Rachel gave me. Emma recited it, and Daniel typed it into his phone one-handed with impressive dexterity. I'll call you, he promised. Not just text, an actual conversation. I'd like that, Emma said. There was a moment of hesitation, that awkward first date pause where both parties assess whether a goodnight kiss is appropriate. But with two sleepy children present and the unusual circumstances of their meeting, Emma sensed that Daniel was erring on the side of caution. Thank you for tonight, he said instead, for being so understanding about. He nodded toward his daughters, everything. It was my pleasure, Emma said sincerely. Really? Good night, Emma, Daniel said, his voice warm. Good night, Daniel, she replied. Good night, girls. She watched as they walked back toward Daniel's car. Rose's head still nestled against her father's shoulder, Lily trudging sleepily beside him, clutching his hand. Just before they turned the corner, Daniel looked back. Even from a distance, Emma could feel the weight of his gaze, the promise in it. As she unlocked her apartment door, Emma realized she was smiling. The evening had been nothing like she'd expected. Instead of a straightforward coffee date with an eligible bachelor, she'd been ambushed by twin 6-year-olds and ended up sharing a family dinner with a widowed CEO who built tree houses with butterfly windows. Her phone buzzed with a text as she stepped inside. It was from Daniel. Just making sure you have my number too, and confirming that I didn't dream the last 3 hours. Thank you for not running away when my advance team showed up. They're unconventional but effective. Emma laughed softly, typing back, very effective, and no, not a dream. At least I don't think my dreams usually include spaghetti-covered 6-year-olds and discussions about universal design principles. His response came quickly. If they do now, I'll consider that a win. Good night, Emma. I'll call you tomorrow. Emma set down her phone, still smiling. Her apartment felt different somehow, the familiar space charged with new possibility. She thought of Daniel's face when he'd said, next time, the gentle way he'd carried his sleeping daughter, the passion in his voice when he spoke about his work. She thought about the treehouse he'd built while grieving the butterfly windows for a wife he'd loved and lost. She thought about 2 little girls who wanted their father to be happy again. Emma had come to the coffee shop expecting a pleasant but forgettable evening. Instead, she'd stumbled into something unexpected and complex, a ready-made family with history and heartache and hope. As she got ready for bed, Emma realized that for the first time in years, she was genuinely looking forward to a second date, not because Daniel Foster was handsome and successful, though he certainly was both, but because beneath the polished exterior of the powerful CEO, she'd glimpsed a man of depth and principle, a devoted father, someone who built things that mattered. When sleep finally claimed her, Emma dreamed of tree houses with butterfly windows, of little girls with whipped cream mustaches and of green eyes that held both sadness and promise. The next morning, she woke to a text message sent at 6:03 a.m. The girls insisted I tell you they're officially ungrounded because, and I quote, the mission was a success. I'm not sure what that says about my parenting, but they're impossible to argue with before coffee. Have a good day, Emma. Looking forward to talking later. Emma found herself laughing out loud in her empty bedroom, already composing her reply. Whatever happened next, she had a feeling that life was about to get a lot more interesting. Morning light streamed through the windows of neighborhood paws, casting warm rectangles across the worn linoleum floor. Emma checked her schedule for the day: 3 routine checkups, a senior cat with thyroid issues, and a rescue puppy needing vaccinations. The familiar rhythm of the clinic usually centered her, but today her mind kept drifting to last night's unexpected dinner. Earth to Emma, Rachel waved a hand in front of her face. I've been talking for 5 minutes and you haven't heard a word. Emma blinked, focusing on her friend and colleague who had returned from her Chicago conference late the previous night. Sorry, I was just thinking about your date with Daniel Foster. Rachel's eyes gleamed with curiosity. Which you haven't told me about yet. How was coffee with the architectural genius? Emma hesitated, unsure where to begin. It was not what I expected. Rachel's expression fell. Oh no, was he horrible, arrogant? Please tell me he wasn't one of those men who talk about themselves for 2 hours straight. No, nothing like that. Emma found herself smiling at the memory. He was late because of a work emergency, and then his daughter showed up. His what? Rachel nearly dropped the patient file she was holding. Emma recounted the events of the previous evening, the twins' unexpected arrival, the revelations about Daniel's past, the impromptu dinner. As she spoke, she realized how surreal it all sounded. Rachel stared at her mouth slightly agape. Let me get this straight. Daniel Foster, CEO of Foster Designs, the guy who's been on the cover of Business Monthly, has 6-year-old twin daughters who crashed your date because they wanted to make sure you didn't think their dad stood you up. That about sums it up. And you didn't run screaming for the hills. Emma, you've avoided dating single parents for years. You always said you weren't ready for an instant family. Emma fiddled with a pen on the reception desk. I know, but this was different somehow. The girls they're extraordinary, and Daniel is, she trailed off, unsure how to describe him. Daniel Foster is one of the most eligible bachelors in the city, Rachel filled in, though I had no idea he was a widower with children. That wasn't in his company profile. He keeps his personal life private. Emma felt oddly protective of this information. He said it's simpler that way. Rachel leaned forward, her expression suddenly serious. Emma, do you realize who you had dinner with Foster Designs is worth millions? He's not just some architect. He's a major player in urban development. Half the city's skyline came from his firm. He's also a father who built a treehouse for his daughters after their mother died. Emma countered softly. A man who carries his sleeping child and knows how to find the North Star. Rachel studied her friend's face carefully. You like him? I barely know him, but you want to know more. Before Emma could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming message. She glanced down to see Daniel's name on the screen, her pulse quickening involuntarily. Speak of the devil, Rachel smirked. I'll leave you to it. But Emma, she paused at the doorway to the exam room. Just be careful. Okay, men like Daniel Foster live in a different world. Emma nodded absently as she opened the message. Dinner tonight, I know a great place where my children definitely won't ambush us, though they've been lobbying hard for another accidental meeting. A second message followed. Unless that's too soon, no pressure. The hesitation in that second text touched her. This powerful CEO uncertain about whether asking for a second date the day after the first was too eager. Emma typed back, dinner sounds perfect. And while I enjoyed meeting your advance team, I wouldn't mind some uninterrupted conversation. His response came almost immediately. Uninterrupted conversation sounds like a luxury I'd forgotten existed. I'll pick you up at 7 business casual. Nothing too formal. Emma confirmed the time and tucked her phone away just as her first patient arrived, an elderly Labrador with arthritis. As she examined the gentle dog, her mind kept returning to Rachel's words. Men like Daniel Foster live in a different world. The morning passed in a blur of furry patients and routine procedures. At lunch, Emma found herself Googling Daniel's company, something she hadn't thought to do before the date. The Foster Designs website was sleek and impressive, showcasing dozens of award-winning buildings across the country. There was a page dedicated to their commitment to universal accessibility and sustainability, principles Daniel had mentioned during dinner. The About section featured a professional photograph of Daniel in a perfectly tailored suit, standing before the glass dome of the Blake Memorial Library. He looked polished and authoritative, every inch the successful CEO. It was hard to reconcile this image with the man who had wrapped his expensive jacket around his shivering daughter without a second thought. A news tab revealed articles about Foster Design's rapid growth, their innovative approach to public architecture, and speculations about their next major project. One business publication referred to Daniel as the visionary reshaping how we interact with public spaces. Another praised his firm's commitment to designing buildings that served all members of the community regardless of physical ability. Emma closed the browser, feeling slightly overwhelmed. Daniel Foster was not just successful, he was influential, important, the kind of man whose decisions affected entire communities. And he wanted to have dinner with her. The afternoon brought a rush of emergency cases. A cat who had eaten a ribbon, a dog with a foxtail in his ear, a parakeet with labored breathing. Emma worked efficiently, grateful for the distraction. By the time she locked up the clinic at 6:00 p.m., she had barely enough time to rush home and change for dinner. Her apartment felt particularly small and modest after browsing through images of Daniel's architectural achievements. She surveyed her closet with new eyes, suddenly conscious of the gap between their worlds. Most of her clothes were practical, selected for a life that involved animal hair and occasional splashes of disinfectant. After trying on and discarding several outfits, she settled on a simple navy blue dress she'd worn to a veterinary conference last year. Professional but not stuffy, elegant but not trying too hard. At precisely 7:00 p.m., her doorbell rang. Emma took a deep breath, surprised by her own nervousness, and opened the door. Daniel stood in the hallway looking more relaxed than he had the previous evening. He traded his formal business suit for dark jeans and a charcoal blazer over a crisp white shirt. Without a tie, with the top button of his shirt undone, he appeared younger, less burdened. The day's stubble on his jaw softened his features. His eyes warmed as they took her in. "You look beautiful." Emma felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." "No architectural emergencies today." He smiled, the expression reaching his eyes. Though the twins did stage a protest when they realized they weren't invited tonight. "How did you appease them?" "Bribery," Daniel admitted without a hint of shame. "Extra screen time and a promise that they could meet your cat sometime." They're fascinated by the name Chairman Meow. The mention of future plans, the casual assumption that there would be more meetings, that the twins might visit her apartment someday, created a flutter of anticipation in Emma's chest. Daniel's car, parked at the curb, was a sleek black Audi, expensive but not ostentatious. As he held the passenger door for her, Emma caught a glimpse of a booster seat in the back, a small stuffed unicorn forgotten on the floor. These small signs of his life as a father humanized the luxury vehicle. "Where are we going?" Emma asked as Daniel navigated through evening traffic. "A place called Riverside. It's on the water, quiet enough for actual conversation, and the chef makes the best seafood in the city." 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a restaurant nestled on the bank of the river that wound through the city. The building was a renovated boathouse with expansive windows offering views of the water and the city lights beyond. A valet appeared as soon as they stopped, greeting Daniel by name. Inside, the maitre d' welcomed Daniel with familiar warmth, leading them to a secluded table by the windows. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation, crystal glasses catching the light from artfully placed fixtures. "You come here often," Emma observed after they were seated. Daniel nodded, a hint of apology in his expression. "It's one of the few upscale restaurants where I can have a business meeting without being interrupted every 5 minutes. The owner values privacy." He leaned forward slightly. "But I've never brought a date here before." The admission hung between them, an unexpected intimacy. Before Emma could respond, a server appeared with water and menus, reciting the evening's specials with practiced precision. After they ordered, pan-seared scallops for Emma, grilled swordfish for Daniel, a moment of awkward silence descended. Without the twins' chatter to fill gaps in conversation, they were suddenly aware of being essentially strangers on a second date. Daniel broke the tension first. "I spent all day thinking about what to talk about tonight, and now my mind is completely blank." The confession startled a laugh from Emma, the great CEO at a loss for words. "Terrifying, isn't it?" His smile was self-deprecating. "I can address a boardroom of investors without breaking a sweat, but sitting across from a beautiful woman who's met my children and hasn't run screaming completely uncharted territory." "Is that what usually happens? Women run screaming when they meet Lily and Rose?" Daniel swirled his water glass thoughtfully. "I haven't given many the opportunity. The twins weren't exaggerating. You're the first woman I've dated since Elizabeth died. The weight of this admission settled between them. Why me? Emma asked softly. Honestly, Rachel was persistent. She's been trying to set me up for months. Apparently, my sister-in-law put her up to it. They're convinced I need to rejoin the world of the living. He made air quotes with his fingers, then grew serious. But when Rachel described you, your dedication to your clinic, your independence, something resonated. You sounded like someone with substance. As opposed to, the women who typically express interest tend to be more focused on foster designs than on me as a person. Or they have very specific ideas about becoming an instant mother to the girls. Emma considered this. And last night, did I live up to Rachel's description? Daniel's gaze was steady and tense. You exceeded it. The way you treated the twins, not as obstacles or accessories, but as people, that told me everything I needed to know. Their first course arrived, a delicate crab bisque that steamed fragrant in the bowls. Emma took a spoonful, buying time to process his words. The twins are extraordinary children, she finally said. You've done an amazing job with them, especially under such difficult circumstances. A shadow crossed Daniel's face. I've made plenty of mistakes. After Elizabeth died, I threw myself into work. Classic avoidance behavior. It took Sophie, my assistant, staging what amounted to an intervention to make me realize what I was doing to them. To us. What happened? Sophie collected 2 weeks of drawings the girls had made at school. Every single one showed me at my desk or on the phone while they played alone. Daniel's voice tightened. It was a wake-up call. I restructured the entire company the following month, delegated more established boundaries. The treehouse the girls told you about, that was part of my promise to be present. Emma was touched by his candor. That takes courage, to recognize a mistake and change course. Not courage, necessity. Daniel's eyes held a shadow of old pain. The thought of failing them was worse than any business setback could ever be. Their main courses arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. The food was exquisite, clearly justifying the restaurant's reputation and undoubtedly expensive price point. Emma tried not to think about how the meal probably cost more than a week's worth of groceries for her. Tell me about your clinic, Daniel said after they'd begun eating. Rachel mentioned it was your grandmother's. Emma nodded, warming to the familiar topic. My grandmother started it in the 70s when female veterinarians were still relatively rare. She built it from nothing into a community fixture. When I was little, I'd sit on a stool in the exam room and watch her work. She had this incredible way with animals. They just trusted her instinctively. Like they trust you, Daniel observed. Emma looked up, surprised. How would you know that? The way you described treating that injured bird the twins found last night. The details you noticed, the patience in your voice. It's clear you inherited more than just the clinic. The perception in his observation touched her. Anyway, when she got sick 5 years ago, I came back to help. I'd been working at a corporate practice in Denver. State-of-the-art equipment, great salary, terrible hours. I thought I'd sell neighborhood paws after she passed, but Emma shrugged. I couldn't do it. It would have been like selling her legacy. So you chose meaning over money. Daniel's voice held no judgment, only understanding. I respect that enormously. It's not always easy, Emma admitted. The clinic needs renovations I can't afford. Last month, our x-ray machine broke down and the replacement cost is more than my annual profit margin. We make do with referrals to the emergency hospital, but it limits what we can offer. Daniel listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about her practice, her patients, her challenges. Unlike many people Emma had dated, he seemed genuinely interested in the details of her work, not merely making polite conversation. As they finished their main courses, Daniel steered the conversation toward lighter topics. They discovered a mutual love for old movies, a shared preference for mountains over beaches, and a common habit of reading multiple books simultaneously. He told her about a disastrous camping trip with the twins the previous summer when a sudden rainstorm had flooded their tent and they'd spent the night in the car, telling ghost stories until dawn. With each revelation, each shared laugh, the gap between their worlds seemed to narrow. Despite his success and status, Daniel was disarmingly unpretentious. He spoke about his work with passion rather than arrogance and listened to her with genuine interest. Over dessert, a dark chocolate souffle they agreed to share. Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it with an apologetic smile that faded as he read the message. Everything okay? Emma asked, noticing the sudden tension in his shoulders. Just work, he said, but his jaw had tightened. The library project again. The one with the foundation issues. Daniel nodded, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Our engineering team thought they'd found a solution, but new complications have emerged. The project manager wants an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Is it fixable? Everything's fixable. The question is at what cost and who pays for it. A weariness crept into his voice. Sorry to bring work into this. Don't apologize, Emma said. Your work is important. It matters to you. Daniel studied her for a moment, his expression softening. Thank you for understanding. Most people either glaze over or see dollar signs when business issues come up. I'm not most people, Emma said simply. No, Daniel agreed, his gaze warming. You're definitely not. After dinner, they strolled along the riverside walkway that adjoined the restaurant. The night was cool but pleasant, the city lights reflecting on the dark water. Other couples passed them engaged in their own private worlds. Can I ask you something personal? Emma ventured after they'd walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Of course. How did you meet Elizabeth? The question had been on her mind since the previous evening, but she'd hesitated to ask. If Daniel was surprised by the inquiry, he didn't show it. Veterinary school. My roommate's dog swallowed a sock, and she was the student on duty at the teaching hospital. A fond smile touched his lips at the memory. She was brilliant, calm and focused despite my roommate's panic. She saved the one and then lectured us for an hour about keeping laundry off the floor. And you were smitten, Emma guessed. Completely. I asked her out the next day. She turned me down flat, said she didn't date dog owners who couldn't manage basic pet safety. Daniel chuckled at the memory. It took 3 weeks of showing up with coffee and demonstrating improved sock storage before she agreed to have dinner with me. She sounds remarkable. She was. Daniel's voice held warmth rather than pain. Stubborn, brilliant, passionate about her work. She specialized in equine medicine after graduation. We were an unlikely match, the architect and the horse vet, but somehow it worked. Emma appreciated his willingness to share these memories. Thank you for telling me about her. It's strange, Daniel admitted. For a long time, I couldn't talk about Elizabeth without feeling like I was being torn apart. But now, he gazed out at the river. Now I can remember the joy without being consumed by the loss. That feels like progress. They reached a small plaza with a fountain, its water lit from below with changing colors. Daniel led Emma to a bench facing the display. Your turn for a personal question, he said as they sat down. The fiancé who didn't want to marry someone prioritizing her career. How long were you together? 3 years, Emma replied. We met in veterinary school like you and Elizabeth. David wanted a traditional setup. Him as the primary breadwinner, me working part-time once we had children. When I was offered a prestigious internship that would have meant relocating temporarily, he gave me an ultimatum. The internship or the engagement. And you chose your career. Emma nodded. I chose myself, really. I realized I didn't want to be with someone who asked me to be less than I could be. She glanced at Daniel. Does that sound selfish? It sounds honest, he replied, and brave. Knowing what you need and having the courage to choose it, that's rare. Emma felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized she was carrying. David's assessment of her as career-obsessed had lingered for years, making her question her choices, her priorities. Elizabeth was the same way, Daniel continued, fiercely committed to her work. When the twins were born, we juggled schedules and hired help so she could maintain her practice. It was chaotic sometimes, but I never would have asked her to give up the work she loved. The casual mention of this arrangement, so different from what David had envisioned for them, struck Emma powerfully. That couldn't have been easy. The best things rarely are. Daniel's gaze was steady. But watching your partner thrive in their passion, that's worth any amount of scheduling gymnastics. They fell silent, the fountain's changing lights casting blue, then purple, then gold reflections across their faces. Emma was acutely aware of Daniel's proximity, the narrow space between them on the bench. The evening had unfolded with an ease she hadn't expected, a connection that seemed to deepen with each exchange. I should probably get you home, Daniel said finally, though he made no move to stand. Early surgeries tomorrow. A dental cleaning at 8 Horsham, Emma confirmed reluctantly. And you have your emergency meeting about the library. Right. Still neither of them moved. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with possibility. Daniel turned slightly toward her, his expression suddenly serious. Emma, I need to be transparent about something. Her heart skipped, bracing for complication. Okay, my life is complex. The girls, the company, the responsibilities. It's a lot. I don't do casual very well. I don't have the time or emotional bandwidth for it. His eyes held hers steadily. If we continue seeing each other, it won't be simple. The The twins will be involved. My work crises will interrupt dinners. There will be school plays and business trips and 1,000 competing priorities. Emma considered his words carefully. Are you trying to scare me off? I'm trying to be fair, Daniel replied. You should know what you'd be getting into. And what exactly would I be getting into? Emma asked softly. The question hung between them. Daniel reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. His palm was warm against hers, the touch sending a current through her arm. Something real, he finally said. Something with potential. I don't know what exactly, but I know I want to find out. The honesty in his voice touched her deeply. I want that too, Emma admitted. The complexity doesn't scare me, Daniel. Real life is messy. It's supposed to be. Relief crossed his features, followed by something warmer. His gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes, the question clear in his expression. Emma answered by leaning forward slightly. Daniel closed the remaining distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deepening as she responded. His hand came up to cup her cheek thumb, brushing her skin with surprising tenderness. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that since you ordered hot chocolate for my daughters. Emma laughed softly. That's your romantic trigger, hot chocolate. Kindness to my children is apparently my kryptonite, Daniel admitted with a rueful smile. He kissed her once more briefly, but with promise, then stood and offered his hand. Come on, let's get you home before your 8 a.m. appointment becomes a midnight emergency. The drive back to Emma's apartment was comfortable, their conversation flowing easily now that the tension of the first kiss had broken. Daniel parked in front of her building and insisted on walking her to her door, despite her protestations that it wasn't necessary. Old-fashioned habits, he explained with a shrug. My father would rise from his grave to haunt me if I didn't see you safely inside. At her door, he kissed her again, longer this time, his arms wrapping around her waist to pull her closer. Emma found herself melting into the embrace, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength beneath his jacket. When can I see you again? Daniel asked when they finally separated. I'm free this weekend, Emma offered, unless you have the girls. I always have the girls, Daniel said with a small smile. But that doesn't mean we can't see each other. They've been asking about you since yesterday. A family outing then, Emma suggested, surprised by her own boldness. Daniel's expression brightened. You wouldn't mind? I'd like it, Emma admitted. They're part of who you are. The simple acceptance in her words seemed to touch something deep in Daniel. He kissed her once more gently. Saturday, then, I'll call you with details. After he left, Emma leaned against her closed door, processing the evening. The restaurant had been more upscale than anywhere she'd eaten in years, a glimpse into Daniel's world of privilege and connections. Yet despite the luxury setting, their conversation had felt authentic, their connection deepening beyond the initial attraction. His parting words echoed in her mind, something real, something with potential. The promise of those words both thrilled and terrified her. Emma had built a careful, controlled life after David's rejection, focused on her clinic, cautious with her heart. Daniel Foster represented disruption to that carefully maintained equilibrium. His world of corporate decisions and private school tuitions was far removed from her modest veterinary practice. And yet, the way he'd spoken about Elizabeth's career, his respect for her professional dedication suggested a man who valued a woman's ambitions as much as his own. The gentle way he parented his daughters revealed a depth of character beyond his professional success. The vulnerability in his eyes when he'd admitted how long it had been since he dated showed a man still healing, still human despite his achievements. Emma's phone buzzed with a message as she changed into her pajamas. Home safe. Already looking forward to Saturday. The girls will be ecstatic. Sleep well, Emma. She smiled at the screen, typing back, Tonight was wonderful. Sweet dreams to you and the terrible twins. His response came immediately. They'd be delighted by that nickname. Don't encourage them. They're dangerous enough already. Emma laughed aloud in her empty apartment, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the lingering effects of expensive wine. Whatever complications lay ahead, whatever adjustments might be required to bridge their different worlds tonight, had confirmed one thing: Daniel Foster was worth the risk. As she drifted towards sleep, Emma found herself thinking not of the impressive restaurant or Daniel's obvious wealth, but of his hands. Strong and certain as they had held hers across the table, gentle as they'd cradled her face during their kiss. The hands that had built a treehouse with butterfly windows. The hands that carried sleeping children and could find the North Star. Her last coherent thought before sleep claimed her was a simple truth: some journeys were worth taking, however uncertain the destination might be. 4 months had transformed Emma's life in ways she couldn't have anticipated that first evening at Winter's Corner. Spring sunshine now warmed the city, flowering trees lined the streets, and Emma found herself standing before a crowd of wealthy donors at Neighborhood Paw's first major fundraising event. Thanks to your incredible generosity, we've already raised enough to fund our new digital X-ray machine, with additional contributions going toward our expanded rescue program. Emma addressed the elegantly dressed crowd gathered in the clinic's newly renovated reception area. Every dollar you've contributed means another animal receives care regardless of their owner's financial situation, or whether they even have an owner. From the back of the room, Daniel caught her eye and gave her a subtle thumbs up. He stood tall in his perfectly tailored suit, commanding attention without effort, while Lily and Rose, dressed in matching blue dresses, chatted animatedly with an elderly couple nearby. The girls had spent the afternoon carefully arranging name tags and placing donation envelopes at each seat with meticulous precision. As Emma concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, she still couldn't quite believe that this was her clinic. The space had been transformed: fresh paint, new flooring, updated furnishings. Even more incredible was the turnout. The room filled with wealthy potential donors, many of whom were Daniel's colleagues and business associates. "You were brilliant," Daniel murmured, as she joined him, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. "I saw at least 3 checkbooks come out during your closing remarks." Emma leaned into him, slightly still marveling at how natural his touch felt after these months together. "I still feel like I'm dreaming. 3 weeks ago, this place had peeling wallpaper and a reception desk from the 80s. The magic was always here. Now the space just matches the quality of care." Daniel guided her toward a distinguished couple, waving them over. "Come meet Harold Chen. His foundation funds veterinary programs for underserved communities." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions, conversations about animal welfare, and the steady accumulation of donation pledges. Emma noticed with amusement how Lily and Rose had appointed themselves her unofficial assistants, appearing at her elbow with water, or directing particularly wealthy-looking guests her way with strategic innocence. "Dr. Peterson, may I speak with you privately?" Robert Whitman, chairman of the city's largest commercial real estate development firm, touched Emma's elbow gently as she finished a conversation with another donor. Emma excused herself and followed him to a quieter corner. Robert had been one of Daniel's first clients 15 years earlier and had remained a steadfast supporter of Foster Designs. His silver hair and impeccable suits projected old money and influence. "Daniel tells me you've been running this clinic single-handedly since your grandmother passed." Robert began, his keen eyes assessing her. "With an excellent support staff," Emma clarified. "But yes, I'm the only veterinarian currently." "Impressive dedication. I've been looking for the right cause to honor my late wife. Patricia was passionate about animal rescue before her cancer diagnosis." Robert's expression softened momentarily before returning to its businesslike default. "I'd like to fund a full-time veterinary position for your rescue program. 3 years guaranteed with possibility for renewal." Emma's breath caught. A second full-time vet would transform what she could accomplish, allow her to save many more abandoned animals, perhaps even start the community outreach program she dreamed of for years. "Mr. Whitman, that's incredibly generous. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept, and call me Robert." His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "Besides, it's somewhat selfish. Patricia would have adored what you're building here. It helps me feel connected to her." Across the room, Emma caught Daniel watching their conversation, a small smile playing at his lips. She had a sudden suspicion. "Did Daniel suggest this donation specifically?" Robert chuckled. "Daniel mentioned your clinic needed support, but the position funding was my idea after reviewing your proposal. He's protective of your independence, you know. Said you'd have his head if you thought he was solving your problems without your involvement." Warmth bloomed in Emma's chest. Even in his desire to help, Daniel had respected her need to build something herself. It was a consideration so thoughtful it made her throat tighten momentarily. As the event wound down and the last donors departed with promises of support, Emma found herself surrounded by her makeshift family, Daniel, the twins, Rachel, and the clinic staff, all wearing expressions of triumphant exhaustion. "Final count?" Rachel asked, kicking off her heels with a relieved sigh. Emma glanced at the preliminary tally on her tablet. Just over $200,000. That's 10 times our annual fundraising goal. Cheers erupted from the staff, Lily and Rose jumping up and down with excitement. Daniel pulled Emma into a celebratory embrace, lifting her slightly off her feet. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered against her hair. Later that evening, after the twins had been put to bed at Daniel's house, Emma and Daniel settled onto the back patio with glasses of wine. Fairy lights twinkled in the garden trees, and the evening air carried the scent of jasmine from the climbing vines Daniel had planted along the fence. "I still can't believe tonight happened," Emma admitted, curling her legs beneath her on the outdoor sofa. "6 months ago, I was worried about making payroll." Daniel's arm rested comfortably across her shoulders, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. "You did this, Emma. Those people weren't there because of me. They were there because you showed them something worth supporting." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, allowing herself to absorb the triumph of the evening. The past 4 months had been a careful dance of integrating their lives. Weekend outings with the twins, quiet dinners. When the girls were with Daniel's brother, gradual introductions to each other's friends and colleagues. "The girls were incredible tonight," she said, smiling at the memory of their determined hosting efforts. Rose knew everyone's names, and Lily practically strong-armed the mayor into increasing his donation. Daniel laughed softly. "Future CEO material, that one. Though I'm slightly terrified of what they'll be capable of as teenagers if they're this persuasive at 6. A comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated only by distant nighttime sounds and the gentle clink of their wine glasses being set on the table. Emma felt Daniel's body shift slightly, a subtle tension entering his frame. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice carefully casual. "You spend most weekends here anyway. The guest room has basically become your office. The girls have cleared space in the bathroom for your things." Emma's heart rate quickened. She'd been thinking the same thing for weeks, but had hesitated to broach the subject. Her small apartment increasingly felt like a place she merely stored her belongings rather than a home. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" Her question hung in the warm night air. Daniel turned to face her fully. "I'm asking you to consider it. No pressure, no timeline. But yes, I'd like you to think about making this arrangement official." Emma studied his face in the soft glow of the garden lights. Over these months, she'd learned to read the subtle signals of his expressions, the slight furrow between his brows that indicated genuine concern, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was truly happy rather than just being polite. What about the girls? The question was automatic, their well-being always her first concern in any evolution of her relationship with Daniel. "They're the ones who suggested it," Daniel admitted with a small laugh. "Last week, Lily asked why we don't just fix the problem of you having to go back and forth. Their exact words were that it's inefficient resource allocation." Emma couldn't help laughing. "They've definitely been spending too much time at your office. So what do you think?" Daniel's voice carried a note of vulnerability rarely heard in the confident CEO. Emma took a deep breath. "I think I'd like that very much." The tension visibly drained from Daniel's shoulders. He pulled her close, pressing his lips to her temple. "I was prepared to present a much more elaborate argument. Charts may have been involved. Save the presentation for the next board meeting," Emma teased, resting her hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "There is one complication we should discuss," Daniel said after a moment, his tone growing serious again. "The Blake Memorial Library project." Emma looked up in surprise. The troubled library project had been a constant background issue throughout their relationship, but Daniel had managed to find engineering solutions for the foundation problems months ago. "I thought that was resolved. The structural issues, yes, but the project has attracted attention from investors looking at the surrounding neighborhood." Daniel's expression tightened. "Victor Reynolds approached me after the foundation ceremony last week." Emma had never met Victor Reynolds, but she'd heard enough about Daniel's chief business rival to feel an immediate chill. Reynolds' development was known for luxury high-rises and had a reputation for aggressive tactics in acquiring properties. What did he want? "He's buying up real estate around the library site. Property values are already rising due to the project, and he's positioning for gentrification of the entire district." Daniel's jaw clenched slightly, including the block where Neighborhood Pause is located. Emma sat up straighter. "My clinic, but I don't own the building." "No, but your landlord is apparently considering selling to Reynolds' company. They're offering well above market value." The implications hit Emma like a physical blow. If they buy the building, they'll likely raise the rent significantly or terminate leases for redevelopment, Daniel finished grimly. "Reynolds mentioned it specifically, said I should give you a heads up that commercial tenants in the area might want to explore other options. That's why he came to the fundraiser tonight." Emma realized, remembering the smooth-talking developer who had made a modest donation while asking numerous questions about her long-term plans. He was assessing whether I'd fight or just quietly relocate. Most likely. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. I wanted to throw him out, but making an enemy of Reynolds publicly would only make things worse. Emma's mind raced with implications. The clinic's location was integral to its identity and accessibility for the community it served. Moving would mean losing clients, disrupting care for animals who depended on them, potentially abandoning their elderly clients who walked to appointments. "What can we do?" she asked finally. Daniel hesitated, clearly weighing his next words carefully. "I could buy the building." The suggestion hung between them, loaded with complications. Emma stood abruptly and moved to the edge of the patio, arms wrapped around herself despite the mild evening. "Emma, no," she said firmly, turning back to face him. "That's exactly what Reynolds wants. To force your hand, make you protect your girlfriend's business. He's trying to use me as leverage against you." Daniel joined her at the patio's edge, maintaining a careful distance, respecting her need for space. "I don't care about Reynolds' motivations. I care about protecting something that matters to you. And I care about not becoming a vulnerability in your business dealings." Emma's voice was quiet but intense. "I won't let our relationship force you into financial decisions. That's not how this works." "This isn't about us," Daniel countered. "It's about preserving a vital community resource. I would consider intervening even if the clinic belonged to a stranger." Emma studied his face, searching for signs that he was simply trying to appease her. "Would you really?" "Yes," Daniel said without hesitation. "But I'd approach it differently. More strategically, less emotionally." "Then let's do that," Emma challenged. "Let's approach this as a problem to solve, not a crisis to avert through brute financial force." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, respect mingling with consideration. "All right, if I were approaching this as a purely strategic issue." They stayed on the patio until well past midnight, sketching ideas on the backs of fundraiser programs, mapping out alternatives and contingencies. By the time they finally went to bed, exhausted but unified, they had the outline of a plan that would protect the clinic without making Emma feel like a damsel being rescued by her wealthy boyfriend. 3 days later, Emma sat in Daniel's expansive office at Foster Designs, waiting nervously as he concluded a phone call. The downtown headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek building Daniel had designed himself early in his career. His corner office featured floor-to-ceiling windows, offering panoramic views of the city, including the distinctive glass dome of the Blake Memorial Library in the distance. "Robert's on board," Daniel announced as he ended the call. "He's willing to provide the anchor funding for the community trust model." Emma exhaled in relief. The plan they developed would create a neighborhood trust to purchase not just the clinic's building, but several surrounding properties, preserving them for community-serving businesses and nonprofits. Daniel would contribute initial funding through a charitable foundation associated with Foster Designs, but the structure would ensure no single entity, including him, could control the property's future. And the other property owners? Mixed responses so far. 4 are interested, 2 are holding out for Reynolds' higher offers, and 3 want more information. Daniel crossed to the windows, gazing out at the city he'd helped shape. "It's going to be a battle. Reynolds won't back down easily." "Neither will we," Emma said with more confidence than she felt. The stakes felt overwhelming. Not just her clinic, but the character of an entire neighborhood hung in the balance. Daniel turned back to her, pride evident in his expression. "You know, most people would have accepted my offer to simply buy the building and be done with it. It would have been easier." "I'm not most people," Emma reminded him, echoing words she'd said on their second date. "No, you're not." The warmth in his voice made her heart flutter despite the seriousness of the situation. "You're extraordinary, and that's why this is going to work." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Sophie, Daniel's assistant, poked her head in with an apologetic expression. "Sorry to interrupt, but Rose's school just called. She has a fever of a 1 and they need someone to pick her up." Daniel immediately reached for his suit jacket. "Cancel my afternoon meetings. I'll head over now." "I can get her," Emma offered, already gathering her purse. "I don't have appointments until 3, and you have that investor call at 2 that can't be rescheduled." Daniel hesitated, clearly torn between parental duty and business responsibility. "Daniel, it's okay. Let me do this." Emma touched his arm gently. "This is what partners do. They step in for each other." Something profound passed across his features, gratitude mixed with a deeper emotion Emma couldn't quite name. "Thank you," he said, simply fishing his keys from his pocket and handing them to her. The house key is on there too. Emergency contact information is on the fridge. I know, Emma reminded him gently. She'd been listed as an emergency contact for the twins since their second month of dating. I'll text you updates. 30 minutes later, Emma was signing Rose out at the front desk of Westlake Academy, the prestigious private school the twins attended. The receptionist gave her a warm smile of recognition. Emma had attended enough school events by now to be a familiar face. Rose appeared in the doorway of the nurse's office, her normally bouncy curls limp around her flushed face, still wearing the practiced stoicism of a child trying very hard to be brave. The moment she saw Emma, the facade crumbled. "Emma," she cried, running forward to be enveloped in a comforting embrace. "I don't feel good." Emma pressed her lips to Rose's forehead, confirming the fever with the universal parental check. "I know, sweetheart. Let's get you home and comfortable, okay?" "Where's Daddy?" Rose asked as Emma guided her toward the exit, one small hand clinging to Emma's. "He had an important meeting he couldn't miss, so he asked me to come get you. Is that okay?" Rose nodded without hesitation. "You make soup better than Daddy anyway." The simple confidence in her statement, the assumption that of course Emma would make soup, would know exactly how to care for her, created a lump in Emma's throat that was difficult to swallow around. At Daniel's house, Emma settled Rose on the living room couch with a light blanket, children's fever reducer, and a cool compress. The little girl drifted into a fitful sleep while Emma prepared homemade chicken soup in the kitchen, moving through the space with the ease of familiarity. She texted Daniel with updates, assuring him that Rose's condition wasn't serious, likely just a seasonal virus according to the school nurse. Emma was stirring the soup when she heard the front door open, expecting Daniel home early, despite her assurances. Instead, she found herself face to face with an elegant older woman she recognized immediately from photographs around the house, Elizabeth's mother, Marilyn. "Oh!" Marilyn stopped short, clearly as surprised to find Emma as Emma was to see her. "I didn't realize anyone would be here. The school called me about Rose." "They called Daniel," Emma explained, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "But he had an important meeting, so I picked her up. I'm Emma Daniels. I know who you are." Marilyn's tone wasn't exactly cold, but it held a distinct reserve. She set her designer purse on the counter and glanced toward the living room. "How is she?" "Sleeping now. Fever's at 100.2, down from 101 at school. No other symptoms besides fatigue." Marilyn nodded, seemingly reassured by Emma's competent assessment. An uncomfortable silence descended between them. "I'm making soup," Emma offered, gesturing toward the pot. "Would you like some tea while we wait for her to wake up?" After a moment's hesitation, Marilyn nodded. "That would be nice, thank you." As Emma prepared the tea, she felt Marilyn's evaluating gaze. Though Daniel occasionally mentioned his former in-laws, they had maintained a careful distance from Emma despite their close relationship with the twins. This was their first meeting without Daniel present as a buffer. "You seem quite at home here," Marilyn observed as Emma automatically retrieved mugs from the correct cabinet. "I spend a lot of time here," Emma acknowledged, deciding honesty was the best approach. "Daniel and I have been discussing my moving in." Marilyn's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see." She accepted the tea Emma offered, then added with surprising directness, "Elizabeth designed this kitchen, you know. She was very particular about where everything should go." The comment was clearly intended to establish territory to remind Emma of her predecessor's continuing presence. Instead of taking offense, Emma nodded. She had excellent taste. The layout is incredibly functional. Emma took a seat across from Marilyn at the kitchen island. "Daniel speaks of her often. She sounds like she was an extraordinary woman." Surprise flickered across Marilyn's features as though she'd expected defensiveness rather than acknowledgement. "She was. Brilliant, dedicated, stubborn as the day is long. Those girls are so much like her, it sometimes takes my breath away." "I see it in Rose's quietness, the way she observes everything," Emma ventured. "And in Lily's determination." Marilyn studied her more carefully. "Yes, exactly that." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Daniel mentioned you're a veterinarian. Elizabeth loved animals from the time she could walk. Her father and I couldn't keep her away from the neighbors' horses." The slight thaw in Marilyn's demeanor encouraged Emma. "Daniel told me about her equine practice. It must have taken incredible dedication to specialize in large animal medicine." "She never did anything halfway." Marilyn smiled faintly at the memory. "When she decided to marry Daniel, Robert, my husband, tried to suggest a longer engagement. Elizabeth just looked at him and said, 'When you know, Daddy, don't make me elope.'" Emma couldn't help smiling at this glimpse of the woman who had captured Daniel's heart, who had given him the twins whose absence had shaped so much of his life since. "She sounds wonderfully decisive." She was. Marilyn's expression grew more serious, which is why I know she would approve of you. The statement caught Emma completely off guard. What? Marilyn set down her teacup precisely. I've resisted meeting you. That was wrong of me, and I apologize. I told myself I was protecting her memory, but the truth is I was protecting myself from accepting that life continues. She glanced toward the living room where Rose slept. But seeing you here caring for her daughter, knowing exactly what medicine to give and soup to make, Elizabeth would have appreciated that kind of competence. Emma found herself blinking back unexpected tears. That means a great deal coming from you. The girls adore you, Marilyn continued. They talk about you constantly during our visits. Lily informed us quite seriously last month that you're practically their second mom already just without the paperwork. Heat rose to Emma's cheeks. They're remarkable children. I care for them very much. And Daniel, Marilyn's question was pointed but not unkind. Do you understand what you're taking on with him? A workaholic CEO with trust issues who builds tree houses in the rain and knows the names of all the stars. Emma replied with gentle humor. Yes, I think I do. Something in her response must have satisfied Marilyn because the older woman nodded once decisively. Good. Then I expect we'll be seeing more of each other. The conversation shifted to more neutral topics. Rose's recent science project, Lily's determined campaign for a pet rabbit, the upcoming school concert. By the time Rose woke from her nap calling for a drink, the two women had reached an understanding that while not quite friendship, held the potential for future warmth. When Daniel arrived home early that evening, having rescheduled his remaining meetings, he stopped short in the doorway to the living room. Marilyn and Emma sat on either side of the couch where Rose rested, all three engaged in a spirited game of Go Fish. The scene was so domestic, so unexpectedly harmonious, that he seemed momentarily speechless. Daddy! Rose's face lit up despite her lingering fever. Grandma and Emma are letting me win because I'm sick. We most certainly are not, Marilyn protested with mock indignation. She simply inherited my card-playing skills. Daniel's gaze moved between them, clearly trying to assess what had transpired in his absence. Emma gave him a subtle nod of reassurance as she gathered the cards. Later, after Marilyn had departed with promises to call tomorrow for an update, and Rose had been tucked into bed with a fresh, cool compress and another dose of medicine, Daniel found Emma in the kitchen, putting away the last of the dinner dishes. So, he leaned against the counter beside her, arms crossed. You and Marilyn seemed comfortable. We came to an understanding, Emma confirmed, closing the dishwasher. She loved her daughter very much, and she loves those girls fiercely. We have that in common. Daniel's expression softened. Thank you for being here today, for handling all of this. This is what family does. Emma said simply, the word family slipping out naturally. Daniel reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Move in this weekend, he said suddenly. Not next month, not when it's convenient. This weekend. The intensity in his voice surprised her. What brought this on? Seeing you here today, with Rose, with Marilyn, making this house feel like a home, it just crystallized something I've known for a while. His gaze held hers steadily. Life is unpredictable, Emma. We've both learned that the hard way. When you find something that matters, you don't wait. Emma felt the weight of his words, the echo of loss that had shaped him, the hard-won wisdom in his urgency. Okay, she agreed softly, this weekend. 2 days later, with Rose recovered and bouncing with her usual energy, Emma found herself directing a small army of helpers as they unloaded her belongings into Daniel's spacious home. The twins had appointed themselves organization specialists, solemnly labeling boxes and instructing Daniel's brother Jason where each item should go. Is this everything? Jason asked, setting down the last box from Emma's apartment. Seems like not much for an entire life. Emma surveyed the modest collection of possessions. I've always traveled light. Growing up, my family moved a lot for my dad's work. Well, now you're home, Lily declared with absolute certainty, placing a hand-drawn welcome sign on what had formerly been the guest room door and was now designated as Emma's office. Home. The word resonated through Emma with surprising power. This house, with its soaring ceilings and designer furnishings that had initially intimidated her, had gradually transformed in her perception. Now she saw beyond the expensive fixtures to the evidence of life and love, the twins' artwork proudly displayed alongside architectural awards, the scuffed areas of hardwood, where the girls raced toy cars, the treehouse visible through the kitchen window. Penny, for your thoughts, Daniel murmured, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of celebratory champagne as the others busied themselves with unpacking. Emma accepted the glass, clinking it gently against his. just thinking about how quickly life can change. 6 months ago, I was sitting alone in a coffee shop, and now you're stuck with all of us. Daniel finished his smile warm with contentment, having second thoughts. Not a single one am I on, Emma assured him, leaning into his side as they watched the twins directing Jason with exaggerated authority. That night, after their helpers had departed and the twins were asleep, Emma and Daniel stood in their bedroom, truly theirs now, with Emma's books mingled on the shelves and her clothes hanging in the closet alongside his. "There's something I want to show you," Daniel said, taking her hand and leading her down the hallway to his home office. He unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk and removed a thick manila envelope. "I've been working on this for a while. It seems like the right time to show you." Emma accepted the envelope with curiosity, opening it to find architectural drawings, detailed plans for a building she didn't recognize. She flipped through the pages, trying to understand the significance. "What is this?" "Plans for a new veterinary clinic and animal rescue center." Daniel explained, his expression a mixture of nervousness and hope. "Designed specifically for your needs, with expanded surgical facilities, separate areas for domestic and wildlife patients, community education spaces. Everything you've mentioned wanting over the months." Emma stared at the drawing, stunned by the thoughtfulness evident in every detail. The design incorporated elements she'd casually mentioned admiring: natural light, efficient workflow patterns, comfortable waiting areas that reduce stress for both animals and humans. "Daniel, this is..." She struggled to find adequate words. "It's just a concept," he hastened to add. "Nothing has been decided. I know you're concerned about Reynolds and the neighborhood trust, but I wanted to show you there are multiple possibilities. This could be built anywhere, the current location if we secure it, or a new site if that becomes necessary." Emma traced her finger over the elegant lines of the building. "You designed this yourself." "Nights and weekends over the past 2 months," Daniel admitted. "It gave me something to focus on when I was worried about the Reynolds situation." The implication struck Emma powerfully. While she'd been stressing about potentially losing her clinic, Daniel had been quietly creating a vision of what it could become. Not as a rescue plan, but as an act of love and understanding. "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me," she whispered, emotion making her voice unsteady. "It's not charity," Daniel said firmly, clearly reading her lingering concerns. "If we move forward with this, it would be structured as a proper business venture. You would maintain control of the practice. I'm just offering the design and development expertise." Emma studied his face in the soft light of the office, seeing the careful balance he was trying to maintain. Supporting her dreams without overwhelming them, offering help without imposing solutions. "You really understand, don't you?" she said softly. "How important this is to me. Not just having the clinic, but building it myself." Daniel nodded, his expression serious. "Your independence is part of who you are. It's one of the things I love most about you." The words hung in the air between them. Not the first time he'd said them, but newly significant in this moment of shared vulnerability. "I love you too," Emma replied, setting the plans carefully on the desk before wrapping her arms around him. "And I love these plans. They're perfect." Daniel's arms tightened around her, his relief evident in the way his body relaxed against hers. "We'll figure out the details later. I just wanted you to know that whatever happens with Reynolds, your work has a future." "Our future," Emma corrected gently, resting her head against his chest. "All of this, the house, the clinic, the girls, it's our shared future now." The certainty in her voice seemed to touch something deep in Daniel. He drew back slightly to look into her eyes, his expression solemn yet radiant with quiet joy. "I never expected to find this again," he admitted, his voice low and intimate. "After Elizabeth died, I thought that part of my life was over. I focused on the girls, on work, convinced myself that was enough. And then you walked into that coffee shop, and your children ambushed me," Emma finished with a soft laugh. "Best strategic move they've ever made." Daniel smiled, then grew serious again. "Emma, I know we've only been together 6 months. I know this is fast by any conventional standard, but nothing about us has been conventional from the start." Emma's heart began to race as she recognized the shift in his tone, the intensity in his gaze. "Daniel, I'm not asking yet," he clarified quickly. "Not officially. The girls would never forgive me if they weren't involved in the planning. But I want you to know that's where I'm headed, where I hope we're headed. A life together, a family, all of it." The simple honesty of his declaration, not a formal proposal but a heartfelt statement of intention, touched Emma deeply. It respected the newness of their living arrangement while acknowledging the seriousness of their commitment. That's where I'm headed, too, she assured him, rising on tiptoes to kiss him softly. And when you do ask, with whatever elaborate scheme you and the terrible twins concoct, my answer will be yes. Daniel's smile was brilliant in the dim light of the office. I'll hold you to that, Dr. Peterson. 4 months later, Emma stood in the backyard of what was now truly their home, supervising as Lily and Rose carefully planted butterfly bushes around the perimeter of a newly constructed garden. The summer sun warmed her shoulders as she adjusted her wide-brimmed hat and checked her phone for messages from Daniel, who had been mysteriously absent all morning on what he claimed was urgent business. The Neighborhood Trust had been established successfully protecting neighborhood paws and several surrounding businesses from Reynolds' development plans. The victory had been hard-won, requiring community organizing, legal battles, and significant financial commitment from multiple stakeholders. Emma had emerged as an unexpected leader in the process, discovering a talent for coalition building that complemented her medical skills. Construction on the expanded clinic, based on Daniel's designs but modified through collaborative planning with the staff, was scheduled to begin the following month. Emma would maintain her role as medical director while adding a second full-time veterinarian funded by Robert Whitman's generous grant. Is this right, Emma? Rose called, carefully patting soil around a purple butterfly bush. Emma knelt beside her, checking the placement. Perfect. The butterflies will love this spot. When will they come? Lily demanded, hands on her hips as she surveyed their work. Patience, Bug, Emma reminded her with a gentle smile. Gardens take time to grow. But once these plants mature, they'll attract monarchs, swallowtails, painted ladies, all kinds of butterflies. Like the ones on Mommy's treehouse windows, Rose said matter-of-factly, without sadness. In the months since Emma had moved in, the twins had grown increasingly comfortable discussing their mother, integrating her memory into their daily lives rather than treating it as a painful subject to avoid. Exactly like those, Emma agreed, helping Rose fill her watering can. This garden will be a special place to remember her. The butterfly garden had been the girls' idea, a way to welcome Emma permanently into their home while honoring Elizabeth's memory. Each of them had selected plants and decorative elements, creating a peaceful retreat visible from both the kitchen window and the treehouse above. Daddy's taking a long time, Lily observed, glancing toward the house with suspicious shrewdness. He said he'd be back to help with the heavy digging. I'm sure he'll be here soon, Emma assured her, though she shared Lily's curiosity about Daniel's extended absence. He rarely missed weekend activities with the girls, especially something as significant as creating the butterfly garden. As if summoned by their conversation, the back gate swung open, and Daniel appeared carrying a large picnic basket and wearing an unusually nervous expression. Sorry I'm late, he called, setting down the basket and surveying their progress. The garden looks amazing already. We did most of it without you, Lily informed him with sisterly accusation. Emma taught us about root systems. Of course she did, Daniel replied with a fond glance at Emma. She's brilliant at everything. Not everything, Emma laughed, gesturing to a slightly crooked row of stones. My edging skills need work. It's perfect, Daniel insisted, his voice carrying an intensity that seemed disproportionate to garden aesthetics. He cleared his throat, suddenly seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. Girls, do you remember what day it is? The twins exchanged a cryptic look that immediately triggered Emma's suspicions. It's Butterfly Garden Day, Rose answered innocently. Too innocently. And what else? Daniel prompted. Lily's face split into a wide grin she could no longer contain. It's Operation Forever Family Day. Emma raised her eyebrows, looking between the three conspirators. Should I be concerned about what that means? Instead of answering, Daniel knelt down beside the picnic basket and unlatched it. To Emma's complete surprise, Chairman Meow, her cat, whom she'd left napping in the sunroom, leapt out wearing a small pouch attached to a fancy new collar. What on earth? Emma laughed as Chairman Meow patted toward her with his characteristic indifference, seemingly unperturbed by his role in whatever was unfolding. Daniel gently captured the cat before he could wander off, carefully removing the small pouch from his collar. This wasn't exactly the elegant plan I had in mind, but someone, he glanced meaningfully at the twins, insisted that Chairman needed to be involved since he's family too. Emma's heart began to race as understanding dawned. She looked from Daniel to the girls, who were practically vibrating with excitement, barely able to contain themselves. Daniel opened the small pouch and removed a stunning ring, a centered diamond surrounded by smaller stones arranged in the shape of butterfly wings. He took Emma's hand, his own trembling slightly despite his usual confidence. 6 months ago, two very determined little girls walked into a coffee shop, With a mission to find someone who would make their father smile. He began, his voice steady despite the emotion visible in his eyes. They found you. Someone kind enough to order them hot chocolate, patient enough to listen to their schemes, and brave enough to take a chance on a broken family trying to heal. The twins moved to stand on either side of their father, each placing a small hand on his shoulders in a clearly rehearsed formation. You've brought light back into our home, Daniel continued. You've loved these girls as your own. You've challenged me to be better, supported me when I faltered, and shown me that second chances can be even more beautiful than first ones. Tears welled in Emma's eyes as Rose stepped forward with a folded piece of paper, solemnly handing it to her. We made you something. With trembling fingers, Emma unfolded the paper to find a childish drawing of their family. Daniel, Emma, Lily, Rose, Chairman Meow, and a small figure with wings labeled Mommy in Heaven floating above them. Across the top in careful block letters were the words, Will you be our forever family? Emma Peterson, Daniel said softly, still kneeling before her in the garden they had created together. We love you, all of us. Will you marry me? Will you be our forever family? Say yes, Lily burst out, unable to contain herself any longer. Please, Rose added more softly, her green eyes, so like her father's, wide with hope. Emma dropped to her knees in the garden soil, bringing herself to eye level with all three of them, tears flowing freely now. Yes, she whispered then more firmly as joy overtook emotion. Yes, I would love to be your forever family. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that had designed buildings and constructed tree houses, and now trembled slightly with the magnitude of this moment. As soon as it was secure, the twins launched themselves at Emma in a tangle of small arms and delighted squeals. Daniel wrapped his arms around all three of them, creating a circle of embrace in the center of the butterfly garden. I told you Operation Forever Family would work, he murmured against Emma's hair. Was there ever any doubt? Emma asked, leaning back to look into his eyes. Not for a second, Daniel replied, brushing away a tear that tracked down her cheek. Some things are just meant to be, even when they arrive 17 minutes late to a coffee shop. As they knelt there together, surrounded by newly planted butterfly bushes in a garden, created to honor the past while celebrating the future, Emma felt the perfect rightness of their unlikely journey. From a failed blind date to a family bound by choice and love, their path had been unconventional, but undeniably meant to be. Above them, a monarch butterfly, the first to visit their new garden, drifted on the summer breeze, its orange wings catching the sunlight as it circled once, twice, and then settled gently on a flower just beginning to bloom.